Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Thrive in China Roundtable. In today's episode, we're going to be looking at how to calculate a salary breakdown in China. So let's get cracking on with the preliminary aspects. Just give me a moment, adding people into the group. There we go. So let's get cracking. I'll be adding people as they come in as well. Now, the beginning slides are really just as a reference point. Again, for those of you that are new to our roundtable, and every week we get newcomers that are popping in, it's always nice for me to understand who is in the audience. What kind of background do you have? Are you a newbie to China, startup, China experienced hand? I know that Joe is starting to reach out to people within our community to understand a little bit their backgrounds. So please do share with him if you don't share it in the chat box. It just helps us to understand who our audience is. A little bit about myself. Again, for those of you that don't know who I am, my name is Christina Kohler-Colucci. I'm the head of business advisory at Woodburn Accountants and Advisors. I've been a leading expert on inbound investment into China for the last 20 odd years. My domain is in corporate services. So really, when you think about it, it's all of the administrative aspects that surround managing and maintaining an entity in China. That includes employees, payroll, all the way down to corporate governance, year-end compliance, accounting, tax, etc. I've helped over 750 companies in the last 20 odd years with their market entry, their implementation. And by implementation, I mean setting up their actual business models, whether that is incorporating an entity or simply transacting with China. And then focusing a lot on their growth and their scaling up in the Chinese market. Again, very much, all these aspects, very much looking at corporate services, corporate administration, corporate governance, corporate compliance. For those, again, of you that are new this week in the community, we are offering a free copy of our ebook, The 10 Biggest Mistakes Companies Make in China. So if you haven't received your free copy, email us at christina@woodburnglobal.com. All right. Roundtable 28 for 2023 is how to calculate the breakdown of the salary package in China. I was finalizing this presentation this morning, and I tried my best to make it as easy as possible to understand. If you've got any questions, honestly, put them in the chat box. I also will be opening up an Excel sheet, which my staff prepared for me, to give you a salary simulation. We've done 2 salary types to help explain the theory behind what I'm going to be educating you on today. So stay tuned for that, because I do have this salary simulation in Excel as well that I will share. All right. What I want individuals as well as companies realize is that the goal for any salary calculation is to make sure that, number one, it's legal, and number two, that we are optimizing the tax situation of not just the individual, but we're also optimizing the tax situation of the company, and we're not trying to evade taxes. Okay? We are trying to create a package where the wishes and concerns of the individuals are met, but also that the company remains in compliance in China. All right? This is fundamental. A lot of people, especially foreigners, when they subscribe to these types of presentations, I think are looking for miraculous ways to evade taxes that they then are going to go back to their company and share. I'm not here to discuss that. We need, all of us need to pay taxes somewhere. The question is, how can we optimize it? How can we protect not just the company, but how can we also protect the individuals? So I'm looking at it from both sides. All right? Because that is ultimately the goal that I'm trying to highlight today. So we're going to look at the various components that make up a salary in China. And again, there are components that are, if you will, fixed, i.e. are mandatory. And there are components which are variables or voluntary or are not a must. Okay? So we're going to tie these all these components together, and I'm going to reflect on all of them so that you have the proper insight. Okay? And I also want to highlight that this presentation is geared to hiring employees that are foreigners, but also hiring employees that are Chinese, okay? Mainland Chinese. And by foreigners, I'm referring also to individuals that are from Macau, Hong Kong, and Taiwan, all right? So let's think about first what makes up a salary package in China, okay? The first two items are mandatory. You have a basic gross salary that is paid from the Chinese entity, that's mandatory. You have social insurance and housing fund, that is mandatory. And you guys are all gonna start questioning things. I know there are nuances based on where you're all living and what you're doing. I'm gonna touch on all of this, but let's go down to the fundamentals. The fundamentals are base gross salary is mandatory, social insurance and housing fund is mandatory, okay? Commissions are voluntary. That really just depends on how you want to incentivize your staff and team. Bonuses are voluntary. Also, something that does not have to be paid. It's a trend that you pay it, but it's not a must. There's no law in China which states you must pay commissions and you must pay bonuses, okay? And allowances. Allowances are also voluntary, okay? Not a must. Now, under the base gross salary, we're going to talk about special deductions. Under allowances, we're going to talk about allowances from foreigners. So I am going to touch on everything, guys, okay? Just bear with me. It all can't happen in one slide. I have to start with the basics, and that is the basics, okay? Now, if you are watching this live and I have not touched one of the 5 points that you do within your company, please do share, because I'd be interested to know what that is. So let's start off with base gross salary, all right? Now, for ease of this discussion, I'm using Shanghai as a foundation, all right? But all of this relates to the fact that wherever you are based in China, you need to look at what minimum wage, average salary, social insurance, and housing fund is for that city that you are based in, okay? I cannot do every single city in China within this presentation. So I've just used Shanghai, and I want you to all realize these are Shanghai hourly rates, Shanghai minimum wage monthly salaries. I've also added Beijing in here just as a comparison. But I also added it here strategically because for me, when I saw these stats, things have changed, okay? So minimum wage varies from city to city. You need to understand what the minimum wage is in China. Now, obviously, if you are a foreign invested company in China, my assumption is that the salaries you are paying for the people that you are hiring are going to be average salaries for the roles and responsibilities that they have. As a guideline, you will find free salary guidelines for China from reputable headhunting firms like Hayes, like Gemini. Oh, there's another one that's on the top of my head, Talent HR, but there's another one that's also on the top of my head. I use 3 of 4, okay, of these salary guidelines. Now, a lot of these headhunters, they publish these salary guidelines, the majority of which are average salaries for tier 1 cities. They break it down into really specific titles and roles, and they do these studies on a quarterly basis. This is all free of charge, guys. Google it, Bing it, whatever you want, search engine you want to use. Go on, look at Gemini HR, Hayes, or different aspects. Kim just mentioned direct HR as well. Exactly, they all have these salary guidelines, okay? I'm starting off again with the foundation. From July 2023, Shanghai has updated its minimum wage from 24 renminbi per hour to 2,690 renminbi per month. There are average salaries that have been calculated for the whole of Shanghai, which goes to a monthly salary of 12,183. That's the average monthly salary that you will see for the majority of employees in Shanghai. And there is a cap which has been looked at based on severance packages of 36,549 renminbi. Okay, I'm going into details here. These are the stats that came up. It's just, again, for you to be aware. All right. Now, one point I haven't mentioned about base salaries, and I realized that from the previous slide. A big question that pops up is, do you pay 12 months salary or do you pay a 13-month salary? And this morning, I just did a quick check and I typed into Google, do you pay a 13-month salary? And there were a couple of websites that popped up, HR websites for China, that popped up and said, it is mandatory to pay a 13-month salary. I just want to highlight here, there is no law in China which states you must pay a 13-month salary. You must pay a monthly salary over 12 months because there's 12 months in the year, but there is no law which states you have to pay a 13-month salary. That is at the discretion of the company. Okay, I want to make that clear because I have checked this morning on a couple of websites to see what people are saying on that point. And I didn't make a specific slide on that. I'm just highlighting it verbally here today. When you are looking at gross base salary, you can base it off of a 12-month salary. Now, when you interview people and you say to them, what is your current salary package? They will usually say, I get paid, I don't know, 30,000 renminbi based on a 14-month package. That is because the 13th and 14th month are guaranteed bonuses. Okay? It has nothing, the 13th and 14th month are not spread over the 12 months. They are just paid externally, and there will be different companies who pay that together with the 12 months in December, or they pay that after Chinese New Year, but it's just actually a guaranteed bonus. All right? So when you are interviewing people, and I think this is the critical point, be very clear and transparent that you pay, I don't know, a 12-month salary, but then there's a guaranteed bonus of a 13, 14-month salary, or the guaranteed bonus is a variable. And we'll touch on guaranteed bonuses later on. Okay, so I do want to highlight that under base salaries because there is no actual law regarding the 13-month. I will say this though, coming from Hong Kong and having started my career in Hong Kong, and I sometimes do wonder if historically this is where confusion arose. But in Hong Kong, it is a 13-month salary. And the reason why there's a 13-month salary, or the reason why you calculate an annual package and you divide it between 13 months, is because individual income tax is paid annually. And in theory, the theory is that that 13-month salary is used to pay the individual income tax for that fiscal year. But that's Hong Kong. That's not China. And I do remember when I relocated to Shanghai in 2003 and we were building up our business, we modeled everything over Hong Kong. So again, mistake. We didn't review the labor laws in China. We just emulated what we did in Hong Kong, and we implemented a system of 13 months. But we didn't fully understand why we were doing that. All right. So again, negotiate how you are wording all of these and make sure you break that down accordingly. Now it comes to social insurance and housing fund. Okay, now there are 5 social insurances: pension, medical insurance, unemployment insurance, work-related insurance, and maternity insurance, which is also paid to men. And then you have housing fund obligations. Okay, these are mandatory 6 items. All right, there are some items where it's just solely the company that pays for it. There are some items which are split between the company and the employee. You can also say that you will cover also the employee's contributions if you wish. That is not mandatory. Okay, the trend has always been that companies will split it. Company pays a portion, employee pays a portion. All right, but these are the social insurance and housing fund obligations. Now it's really, really important to note that social insurance rates for each of these items are different. In addition to that, the rates vary from city to city. Okay, and generally they are according to the standard of living. And I will just now go back one slide, because what shocked me about these stats is that the hourly rate for Beijing and the monthly minimum wage for Beijing, the hourly rate is higher than in Shanghai. The monthly rate is still lower than Shanghai. But if you look at the average salary in Beijing, it's higher than it is in Shanghai. This really surprised me, because historically, Shanghai has always had a higher standard of living. And as a result, salaries have always been higher in Shanghai. And it's very interesting for me to see in 2023 this turn of events. I don't really know what that means. Haven't looked at the economic scenarios around that. I just thought that stat was very intriguing for me. Now, all of that relates to the social insurance rates, because what I'm interested now to know is whether the rates for Beijing are higher than Shanghai. I have not checked that today. That's something that can always be checked later on if you are truly interested. But Shanghai used to be way, way higher than Beijing. Now I'm guessing it might be a little bit more even. So the rates related to the social insurances and housing funds are all different compared to the different cities that you live in. It's always been based off of the standard of living in those locations. And generally speaking, they are increasing over time, unfortunately, making the costs associated with social insurance and housing fund more and more to the disappointment of companies. But on the other side, I'm fully aware that social insurance and housing fund protects the employees. It's like the similar concepts of Social Security in Europe. In the US is the 401k. I mean, these are vital things that you should be offering to your employees. Now, what people don't necessarily know is that there are also supplemental insurances that are available. Supplemental insurances come from commercial insurances and supplemental housing fund insurances. These are voluntary, completely up to you if you want to pay them. I just want to highlight, you cannot choose for which individuals you want to pay them to. If you choose to provide supplemental insurances, you are providing them to your entire company, to all the employees that you are employing within your company. In addition to that, you may find that in certain organizations that have over 50 employees, it becomes then kind of a trade union obligation that you provide this additional provide this additional commercial insurance and the supplemental housing fund insurance. Now, the reason why I say all of this is because we had a client who eventually set up their own entity. They had used an EOR provider, an employment of record provider, to employ 2 to 3 staff. And the negotiation when they moved these contracts to the entity they had set up was that, well, with our EOR, we're being provided these commercial insurances and supplemental housing fund insurances. We want to maintain that. And this was not calculated in the budget of my client. And the issue for him was he only got an invoice of a total amount, a total sum without the breakdown, and didn't even know that the EOR provider was providing this commercial insurance and supplemental housing fund insurance. Again, these are not huge amounts, but if the quantity of headcount increases over time, it does affect your budget. So make sure you're checking whether you're offering this, and you cannot offer it as a type of bonus or incentives for certain employees. If you do it, it's for the whole organization. All right. The commercial insurance is basically an additional insurance or an additional premium, if you will, if accidents happen within your organization in terms of property damage, or if somebody suffers disability, or they've got longer sickness, etc. And the supplemental housing fund, again, is to add more funds into their housing fund if they are looking to buy a property or have already bought a property and there's mortgage payments that have to be made. Okay. Now, I also want to highlight a couple of things that are nice incentives. So I'm going to go back to this slide. Social insurance and housing fund. There is a minimum package for all of that. Okay. You have a minimum that you need to pay into the social insurance and housing fund. An incentive that I offer to my staff, which I pay extra for, really it's peanuts, is I make sure they do a health check once a year. The health check means that they go into the clinics, They do a full body scan, blood test, x-rays. I mean, it's the whole shebang, and they have that. I also offer for my staff, in case of severe illness, so that's under the medical insurance component. It's not considered a supplemental insurance. It's just something it's an add-on, if you will, that you can offer, which is you pay a little bit more for the medical insurance one, that they can get insurance on severe illnesses, like, for example, if your staff gets cancer, etc. There are also add-ons that pertain to, for example, single family units, single parent units, where you can offer incentives for children if they need checkups and things like that. So get familiar with these social insurance and housing funds. A fantastic first step for this is talk to the state-owned organizations who organize all of this, like FESCO. They can break this down to you in great detail. You know, there are other payroll, if you will, payroll agencies that are state-owned that focus on assisting with the social insurance and housing fund, like CIIC, Zhongzhi, etc. They can provide all of that to you, and they do have English-speaking staff as well to give you that incentive. Of course, you can always come to me, not a problem, but you can also go to them if you wish. All right. So that's that. Now, employers' obligations. So if you're not aware, social insurance and housing fund is now paid to the tax bureaus, no longer to the labor bureau departments. This is a better way to be able to track that companies are actually paying their social insurances and housing funds. Now, it is up to you as a company to make sure that you are properly calculating, properly withholding the various payments, not just for social insurance and housing fund, but also for individual income tax. Okay. Now, if the tax bureau finds anything suspicious, finds that your calculations have been wrongly calculated, you might have penalties, or eventually you can also be blacklisted from the labor bureau. So be very, very careful how you do all of this. It's really not a joke, and you're taking these employees' lives into your hands by employing them and just getting this right. I mean, if I look at stories, and I did a quick check last night because my husband and I were talking about it, you know, what happens if a company in Europe doesn't properly calculate Social Security? Or, you know, in the US, if you don't properly do the 401k that you offer to your staff. I mean, there's serious repercussions. So please have the expectation that also in China, there are serious repercussions. Okay, it's not a country that you can get away with this stuff. Have respect with your employees and make sure you do this properly. Now, I have an attitude because I've seen companies not do that. And obviously, it always leaves a bad taste in my mouth when they don't do it. Now, how to calculate the social insurance, okay? And again, we're going to do the simulation, and I'm going to show you all of that. But for new hires to your organization, the starting salary will be used as the Social Security base during the first year, using the assumption that that salary base is below the ceiling of the threshold, okay? So Social Security contributions have floors and have ceilings, meaning the floor is minimum wage, right? And so minimum wage is the minimum base that you're going to use. And then the ceiling is capped, and that increases every single year, okay? Now, usually between June and August, the government will come in and say, we are changing the caps, and it never goes down. It's always going up. And I'll show you what that cap is in Shanghai, again, through the simulation, okay? Now, after the first fiscal year, so if the employee starts, I don't know, in April, they work until December. When you are starting the next fiscal year, i.e., let's say 2024, you're going to be using the average salary of that individual from April to December and use that base as their Social Security contribution base. That really makes things complex and makes things difficult to understand when you are looking at salary breakdowns, okay? But that is what is going to then be utilized. And why do they do that? They do that because some staff will get commissions. That will change then their gross salary amount. And there'll be variations then if those commissions are paid quarterly or biannually or whatever the case may be. Commissions are also a variable. So the amount itself may change month to month, even if you pay it month to month. And as a consequence, they're going to take the average of the total and use that average as for looking at the Social Security base. Again, capped at the threshold amount. If you guys have any questions on this, please do let me know. All right, foreigners and social insurance. Don't attack me on this, guys, okay? So foreign employees that are working in China have been required to participate in the schemes since 2011. However, obviously, we all know there are major inconsistencies throughout the cities of China on what the local regulations are for foreigners contributing to the social insurance and housing fund schemes. Now, cities like Beijing, Shenzhen, Tianjin, Nanjing, they've always been like, no, foreigners, you're paying it automatically, etc. I remember in 2011, though, there was only one district in Beijing that made it compulsory, and then eventually it scaled into the rest of the city. But Shanghai has always been like, no need. They've never localized this. However, I just want to highlight here that in the last 3 years, I've seen a bit of iffiness. I didn't know what else word to use, and I apologize for that, but there's been a bit of iffiness around because there's no real clear and transparent law that has come out transparently saying foreigners must pay. But we have seen the trend that a lot of companies in Shanghai have proactively started putting their foreigners into these social insurance schemes. And I don't know if it was COVID. I don't know if they were asked by the labor bureaus, but it's a very clear trend where I would say now a good 85% of all companies registered in China that have foreign employees have added those foreign employees into the Shanghai social insurance scheme. When I am advising new clients coming into China, I am advising them to add and calculate that their foreigners are going to be part of the social insurance and housing fund schemes. Better to budget than not budget at all. All right. A lot of it will come down to your tax bureau. So it really is case by case. I have a feeling tax bureaus are going off and telling companies your foreign staff need to now be included. So I just want to have a conclusion. If you have new foreigners that are being expatriated over and they're residing in Shanghai, employed by your Shanghai entities, I would make sure that that is calculated in, not that you get into any trouble, but also not that the individual gets into any trouble. Probably not what a lot of people wanted to hear, but that's just the feeling I've had, and it's something I'm just pushing for now to, again, not get into any trouble. Commissions and bonuses. Now, sales commissions, again, are voluntary, and they are considered like incentives and rewards to motivate your salespeople to do more. Completely up to you to decide whether you pay that monthly, whether you pay that quarterly, but I'm guessing in order to really understand what sales have been achieved and to understand when sales are finalized, again, this is all company policy, there's a period of calculation that has to be made. So potentially the January commissions are paid then with the February salaries, right? Maybe you have 1 month leeway there. Commissions, now, I define that as sales commissions, meaning somebody has achieved something within the company and they are getting a commission. There is a lot of misunderstanding, miscommunication, because some companies use the word bonus for commissions. Bonuses can be treated differently in China, and it's really important to make no discrepancy between the two and to separate the two. One is commissions and one is bonuses. Commissions are treated as part of the gross salary calculations. So when I say you've done sales in January, you understand what the commission is going to be paid to the individual, it is added up within the gross salary. And social insurance is declared off of that. All right. Now, I say this because bonuses, in my mind, again, based on definition, are annual rewards. You look at the individual's performance, you look at the company's performance, you might even have a matrix system, I don't know, but a bonus is paid annually, maybe after the fiscal year. Usually in China, it's done around Chinese New Year time, like February, March, April, around that time. And when you are talking about bonuses, and when there's one bonus that is being offered, there is a special tax methodology that is used to reduce the tax burden on that bonus payment. So I have a clear definition of what is commission and what is bonus. And you have to understand that bonuses are paid once a year, and then you have this one-time annual bonus. Now, I had a client who has just a team of salespeople, and he gives out commissions twice a year, and there is no bonus. Okay? Commissions are basically the bonus. So we've been very careful on how to word this to the employees and how to write up the employment contracts on this, to basically state that the first commission that is received, because usually when they first start, they're never going to earn high commissions. They need to start off, and basically it builds up from there. The first commission will be part of the gross salary, but the second commission in that fiscal year will be under the bonus scheme. It's really important to highlight all of this and to have clarity over this in your employment contracts. Otherwise, you will naturally have misunderstandings, then disagreements, and then negotiation with these employees. And I personally just don't want to spend time on that. All right, so up to you whether you highlight it in your employment contracts. My recommendation is please do highlight that in your employment contracts. Now, allowances. I've split this up into two sections. All right. The first one I want to talk about is special additional deductions. Now, in 2019, special additional deductions were offered to foreigners as well as local Chinese employees. So when you are calculating your income tax in China, you have an automatic standard deduction of 60,000 RMB or 5,000 RMB per month, 60,000 RMB for the annual deduction. You also have special deductions, which are obviously from the social insurance and housing fund calculations, but then you have these additional special deductions that also are deducted. All right. Now, the special additional deductions cover 7 items. And I just want to reemphasize, it's also for foreigners as well as expatriates. In 2022, nursing expenses, you can call them au pair or nanny expenses, if you will, for children under the ages of 3 years old was added in. You have children's educational expenses, continuing educational expenses, healthcare costs, housing loan, expenses for supporting the elderly, and housing rent. Okay. Now, in addition to that, as of August 2023, the threshold of these 3 items were increased. So for nursing, I call them nanny expenses, for children under the 3 years old, was raised from 1,000 RMB per month to 2,000 RMB. Again, you can see just costs are rising. Children's education was also increased from 1,000 to 2,000. Supporting the elderly was increased from 2,000 to 3,000. And if you were an only child, the deduction is 3,000. But if there are additional children for that elderly support, so if there's two siblings or 3 siblings, it gets reduced down to 1,500 per month. Okay. Now, some of you might be getting confused. How does this relate to the allowances for foreigners? Okay. The allowances for foreigners is obviously separate from these special deductions, although these special deductions are also accounting for foreigners, especially if they are married to Chinese people and they have those deductions. So, if you're married to a Chinese individual who is providing elderly support and that Chinese spouse is not working, and you're covering that expense, then it's included. Okay. Now, allowances for foreigners, if you all haven't heard, has been extended. All right. So housing allowance, meal allowances, laundry expenses, relocation fees. Guys, this has not changed at all. Home visitation, meaning traveling back home, language training fees, children educational expenses. This has always been there, still remains the same, okay? Housing allowance, just make a really important note here. You need the FAPCAL. Meal allowances, it's very unclear what is the threshold on that, but obviously you need the FAPCALs. Home visitation is not more than 2 times a year where you can do that. Language training fees, children's education expenses, the same, but you need the official FAPCALs, okay? Now, it's been extended till December 31st, 2027, which is great news. Extended for all of China, for foreigners living throughout China, all right? Now, one thing I want people to be aware of is that there is no specific law of how much of the allowances can be part of the total compensation package of a foreigner. We all know there are rules of thumb, but there's no specific law, okay? The tax law only states that it needs to be a reasonable amount. Now, in market, when you look at most corporate service providers that have been in market for a number of years, they will probably say you should not, the rule of thumb is to not go over 30% of your total compensation package as your allowances. If you guys are doing more than that and you're getting away with it, great. But the rule of thumb is around 30%. Okay, so if your total compensation package is out of 100, you should be declaring 70 as your base salary and 30 as allowances. Now, I want to highlight something extremely important because this is where headquarters get lazy for foreigners, or even Chinese subsidiaries get lazy, is the allowances are either verbal or written in email. These allowances have to be indicated in the employment contract. If they are not within the employment contracts, the tax bureau will not do the deductions. And when they do the audits on you, they will review that. So emails, not permissible. And I'm going through this right now in Shanghai. So I just want to highlight it because this is fresh. They have had to amend the employment contract to make sure all the allowances are included and to indicate the thresholds of what is permissible. So housing, I think they've said something like 45,000 for this expat, etc. They've had to put the actual amounts inside. So, and that's the back and forth that went with the tax bureau. So I do want you to please be aware of that. Obviously, for those of you guys that have been, for those of you individuals, foreign individuals that have been in China longer and you're getting away with it, fine. I have no issues with it. Just know that if something pops up, which it could at any point in time, this is what could pop up, right? You would have to go back to your companies and say, we have to update the employment contracts, etc. So this is great news for a lot of the foreigners. This, quite frankly, is also really great news for companies, because I know that I have friends who work in HR departments, and this has been very, very stressful. You know, foreigners were leaving China. A lot of foreigners left China because of these regulations that were supposed to finish in December 31st this year. So for this to have an extension, it's amazing. I also think it's going to attract a lot more foreigners to come into China, especially for 24, 25, 26, 27 for the next 4 years. Look, this is all plus in my mind. Now, I do just want to make a point here. I was okay with the law changing. I was okay with the law changing because I understand why the government was doing it. They want to create a fair playing field between mainland Chinese individuals and foreigners. I get it. I hope you all get it. They don't want to give foreigners special treatment anymore. And quite frankly, I'm taking COVID out of the picture. Shanghai is not a hardship place anymore. A lot of cities in China are not hardship locations. So, you know, why are foreigners getting better treatments than the locals? I am defending the locals on this. I am obviously, as a foreigner, happy that this is extended. I'm also happy for a lot of my clients who have foreigners on the ground that this is extended because they were worrying about this additional cost that was coming onto them to make sure that their foreigners that were staying were still getting paid the same net salaries. But I also get the Chinese government. We're living here now in 2023. I mean, I've been in the market for 20 years. For Christ's sake, Shanghai is no more a difficult place to live. Neither is Qingdao, neither is Beijing, neither is Nanjing. So I understand why they're doing it. You know, their goal is, please hire the locals. You know, we have unemployment, hire them, don't bring in the foreigners. And I also want to highlight, because I've seen this here now in Luxembourg, this is the same spiel that every single government does. They want locals to be employed. They don't want expatriates to come in. And a lot of countries are actually placing quotas on the number of, I know in Dubai, for example, there is a quota on the number of visas that can be issued for foreigners per month. So if your company doesn't get in the lottery to get that quota, you have to wait the following month. So I don't know if things like that are going to pop up in China, but look around, guys, at places where foreigners are being hired. It's not easy anymore. So please be aware of that. Income tax in China. Obviously, this is all why we've come in. How are we going to optimize everything? How are we going to calculate everything? All right. Now, the current income tax law was implemented Jan 1st, 2019. So you are looking at a system where you calculate your income tax based on the annual package. Annual income includes salaries, wages, commissions, remunerations, royalty income, bonuses, etc. The automatic deduction is now at 5,000 per month, 60,000 renminbi per annum. And I obviously have put these tables here. It's not always so straightforward to look at these tables. I put the monthly and the annual. I don't find it so easy to look at the tables. I think it's always easier to look at a simulation. So let me change my screen share and give you that simulation. Okay. Can you guys see this? It's quite small. I apologize. If you can just put in the chat box, can you read it? I will highlight columns, but I just want to make sure that it's not too small. I can always make it a little bit bigger. Is that better maybe? Oops. Did I do something? Is that better? Okay. Thank you, Kim, for replying. All right. So I've done 2 simulations. Again, I want to emphasize Shanghai. All right. I have done a simulation looking at the breakdown per month, January to December. Okay. I have chosen a salary that is above the current threshold in China, which you will see here. Let me put this in bold. Is that working? Which is 36,549. That is currently the cap, the ceiling of calculating the social insurance and housing fund base. Let me highlight that as well. All right. So the first package I've outlined is 40,000 renminbi. Oh, let me go back. Is 40,000 renminbi. The second package I am creating, or simulation that I'm creating, is for 20,000 renminbi. Now you have to understand that anything under this 36,549 cap is calculated based on the salary of the individual. Okay. Now you might be wondering why we have gone from 36,500 to 40,000 here. We've done it to show you how, and this will not be, maybe the number is not properly reflected, but it's to show you how in generally July, could be June, could be August, the cap threshold changes. So this is like a real simulation where you will see a change in the base. Okay, and that's what I wanted to highlight with this package. So if you see a change in July with the base, you've got to understand that's a government institutionalized item that is automatically increased, and it's indicated by the local Shanghai government. The same will happen in other places within China. Here, it's not reflected because the person's salary is still at 20,000, and it's calculated on the 20,000. Okay. Now, realize that the basis for social insurance and housing fund could vary. In Shanghai, they're at the same level, but it's just to highlight in certain cities, they may vary. So if you see a variance on that calculation, check what is the base in your city for social insurance and for housing. It's two separate issues. Now, unfortunately, my staff, I realized when I was trying to work through this today, did not properly give the breakdown. And I also realized that not the 5 social insurances were added, and I'm not sure why, but it's just to give you a simulation, guys. This is not completely accurate. You will have pension, you will have medical insurance. She might not have added maternity. You'll have the accidental insurance. Oh, I know why. It's because maternity insurance is fully covered by the employer, not the employee. All right, I know why. So like I said earlier, under social insurance and housing fund, not all items are split between employee and employer. Their maternity is paid fully by the company. It's not a split. So that's why there are only 4 items here. All right. So you will see here, formulas, which when HR staff try to understand these formulas, they really don't get it. You'll also see percentages, 8%, 2%, 0.5%. And here's a even more severe calculation. It's 2% of the, where's the 7%? Of 7%. So the formulas themselves in terms of calculating the social insurance components is not straightforward. You need to have somebody who's experienced enough to make these calculations. All right. You then have the subtotal of the total social insurance that is going to be paid from the employee. This 7,126 is deducted from the 40,000 gross salary. Okay, so the employee's individual part is deducted from the 40,000 gross salary. Okay. Then you have the amounts before tax. So you have the 31,873. Then on that, you have the tax calculation. Now, if you look here, and this is really why I wanted to give you a 12-month spectrum. If you look here, over 12 months, the individual income tax component is completely varied, guys. Why? Because we are looking at annual income tax declarations, but the monthly amounts need to be withheld. So when you are looking at January, you're only looking at the January salary. But when you are looking at February, you're looking at the January and February salaries or calculations. When you're looking at March, you're looking at January, February, and March. It becomes accumulative over time to the point where in December, the person is going to be paying more tax, but in theory, it's going to leverage itself out. All right. So there are also employees who don't get this. Okay, they don't understand why every month their individual income taxes is varied. You need to go to these employees to explain it. Okay. Now, I want to say from this simulation, it's not fully accurate because again, the 40,000 threshold might not be accurate for next year, but it's just, again, I just want to show you this insight. Okay. Now, one thing I also did not mention under social insurances, and it's not the individual part, it's the social insurance for the employer. We have not provided here a breakdown. We've just provided the total. Okay. I'm going to use Shanghai as an example. In Shanghai, when you have housing fund, you can decide whether you pay 5% housing fund, whether you pay 7%, or whether you pay 12%. It's up to the company to decide that. All right. 5% is totally fine. I pay 5%. I pay the minimum. I'm a small SME in China. I'm not an MNC. I don't know what they pay. However, if you have employees moving from company to company, I need you all to be aware that they might come from a company who pays 12% for the housing fund. So you need to explain all of that. That in your company, the policy is X, Y, and Z. So these rates, get yourselves familiar, not just with the rates, but with the variances of rates and what you can choose for the different social insurance and housing fund aspects. Okay. This variance, I actually only recently learned about. So I openly say to people, I don't know everything. My payroll agent, who I've been working with actually for the last 20 years, just automatically chose on my behalf 5%. I was never even given an option, never actually informed about it. The reason why I got familiar over this during COVID is because when there was a lot of movement of employees, these types of discussions started coming up. Brand new information to me. Was not aware of it. Okay. Now I've added here service fee because it is part of the breakdown. If you are using a payroll agent to calculate your salaries and is also handling different aspects of your payroll, then you will have a service fee that's included in the breakdown. And then you'll have the total payable that is paid by the company, okay? Which is ultimately gross salary plus the service fee plus the social insurance paid by the employer, okay? So this is actually, if you look at the the yellow here, this is the net income the individual is going to receive in that fiscal year. This is the total payable that the company is going to pay at the end of the year. And I've done the same simulation for somebody who's earning under that threshold. Okay. So if you're earning in Shanghai 20,000 as a gross salary, that is ultimately what is your base. The social insurance individual part is calculated off of that. Then the taxes, as you can see, are also staggered, right? With the majority coming over time. You then have the social insurance part that is paid by the company. If you look at the after-tax net salary that the individual is going to get, and then the total cost at the end. Guys, I'm not a payroll specific technical person. So I have done this to the best of my ability to explain these simulations. If you want more details, happy to have a one-to-one conversation with you, but I'm going to be bringing on my staff into those meetings so that they can explain. But just let me know if you do need that. Okay, so I hope these simulations give you a little bit of insight. This is actually how we prepare payroll breakdowns for our employees. Now, I have clients whose headquarters, so not even China experts, prepare these, and there are so many mistakes that happen. I mean, just incredible, to the point where the tax officers get frustrated, upset, and penalties arise. Please make sure you work with people who know what they're doing and making the calculations correct. If the tax bureau is silent on all of this, it's fantastic. We are doing a liquidation right now for a company where one of the biggest issues at the tax office was actually that the termination compensation of the entire team was miscalculated. It caused us 2 months in delay on the liquidation process to fully understand where the miscalculations were for the termination compensation. So, you know, if you are planning on exiting the market at some point, these are issues that will arise when you are doing the liquidation. All right, let's go back to the presentation. Okay, and I certainly hope that the payroll simulation gave you guys some form of clarity. Now, your companies should be withholding the monthly income tax. And it should be withheld at the tax bureau. It's a really weird system. Don't ask me, but it's like you're paying it to the tax bureau, which is why there's always going to be an annual income tax declaration. Currently, when we're looking at this year's fiscal year, the deadline is going to be March 31st, 2024. So if you have employees that are earning more than an annual income of 120,000 RMB, an annual income tax declaration must be filed. The annual income tax declaration is not a company's responsibility. It is an individual's responsibility to do. But I always think as a foreign investor, cross your T's, dot your I's, make sure they're doing it. When you're in, and something that we do is we train employees that aren't familiar with the system, because you have to set up your own personal username and user account. I think you even have to use your Chinese ID number to log in. We help them to learn how to use the system and what to do. But ultimately, why do you have this annual income tax declaration? First of all, for your monthly salary, you're making sure that you have withheld the appropriate amount. In addition to that, if the individual is earning income in other areas, for example, rental of a house, a lot of Chinese employees will own property, they're renting it out, they're earning rental income, it needs to be declared in this. Okay, so please, please, please make sure that all additional income is declared within these annual income tax declarations, and that your individual employees are doing this. Make sure, again, you're crossing the T's and dotting the I's. I know you don't have responsibility of this. There's going to be no legal claim if your staff don't do it. I just think it's better to make sure it gets done. Now, the last point I want to touch on is residency rules for foreigners in China. All right. Now, a resident individual in China is somebody who is domiciled or is actually residing and has a work permit and a residence visa in there. But if you are traveling in and out of China, and if you've been there for more than 183 days in a tax year, you could be considered a resident individual. All right. So please, please, please track your foreigners inbound, entry and exits from China. Make sure you're calculating the number of days, because on their next visit, they could be caught at immigration, which is becoming more and more frequent on this. Now, I say this because I think with borders being opened, people are starting to travel more. Certainly in 2024, that's going to pick up. Please remember this. It's something that people have forgotten during COVID with the borders being shut. Please do remember this point. Okay. Now, this leads me to the residency rule for foreigners in China. In 2019, they updated the residency rule from 5 years to 6 years. Basically, what this means is that after your 6th year, so starting from your 7th year, you as a foreigner are liable to pay income tax in China on your worldwide income. So if you've got a compensation package that's split between China and headquarters, even your headquarters income will be taxable in China. Now, any foreigner can break this 6-year rule with a single departure, leaving China for 30 consecutive days. Then your clock starts again at 0. All right. Now, for those of you that have been in China for a long time, I just want to remind you, especially with lockdowns, China borders being shut, this regulation came out in 2019. So if you calculate 2019, 2020, 21, 22, 23, 24, we're starting in the 6th year. You may want to consider getting out of China as a precaution in 2024 for 30 consecutive days, if you haven't done that since. Okay, so please do just keep that all in mind. Now, I wanted to finish off today's presentation with an action plan for individuals as well as for companies. All right. Now, as an individual in China, mainland Chinese or Western, it doesn't really matter. Make sure you, as the employee, have transparency and clarity over your salary breakdown. All right. If your employment contracts are not clear, then, ask, right? Don't, and I just want to say, people start getting aggressive with this type of stuff. There's no need to become aggressive. If your employment contract is not transparent and clear on how the salary breakdown is, what is the definition of a commission? What is the definition of a bonus? Or how are allowances and special deductions calculated? Then ask. Make sure those things become transparent and clear. If there are company policies that are separately built up outside of the employment contract, like, I don't know, in the employee handbook, have you read that? Is it clear for you? Now, for foreigners, I just want to make a note. I mean, I think it's important for anybody, but I have a family member specifically where this happened, not me, but my aunt. Make sure you obtain all of your tax receipts, as this obviously impacts you not only in China, in case you as an individual get tax audited, but also when you leave China. and you go abroad and you start thinking of retirement. This happened to my aunt. She lived for 13 years in Hong Kong, had her own business, was paid a salary out of it, paid income tax. And I use Hong Kong. You can use whatever abroad country you want. This is a rule of thumb wherever you live, anywhere in the world. She went back to France. She just retired in 2020, and she had no proof of her 13 years of working in Hong Kong. She hadn't kept a single thing. She hadn't kept her business license. She didn't keep any of the paperwork. And granted, that paperwork was from the 70s, but she didn't maintain it. And as a result, this has now affected her retirement status and her income in France. So as a foreigner, as an expat, please do keep your tax receipts. Remember to keep it all filed away. Make sure you have either digital copies or original copies. Just make sure you have proof of where you have worked for your retirement. I assume the same would be for the Chinese. Make sure you have all of this paperwork readily available and at your access. As an employer in China, okay, you've got to understand the trends of how salary packages are being built over time. Things have changed compared to 2003 when I first arrived to today. A lot of different changes have happened. Packages have become more localized, and there are certain differences that have occurred. So if you want to retain employees, if you want to incentivize them, and most importantly, if you want to beat out your own competition, and the goal is to retain employees, make sure your packages are optimal, right? That you can keep the staff. What I want people to review, though, is the following, or not people, what I want companies to review in China is the following, not just in China, even with headquarters, is the following. We have all been using third-party providers to calculate and pay our Social Security payments and individual income tax payments. We use payroll agents, all right? We have all switched our clients that Social Security payments are paid by themselves, that all companies have their own social insurance accounts and housing fund accounts. We make sure all of our clients have these accounts under their own company names and are not relying on third parties to filter through those Social Security payments. Why have we done that? Again, it's to become more independent, take away the duties of a lot of the third parties, but also most importantly, it's because of this whole issue around hiring individuals in other places. People are getting in trouble for that. Not people, companies are getting in trouble of that. Third parties are closing down because of that. So just make sure you're bringing stuff in-house. The second is labor contracts. There are a lot of foreign companies that centralize their labor contract management in the HQ. Honestly, for ease of efficiency, this needs to be centralized in the local Chinese subsidiary. You need to have all of these documents there. Same for foreigners. I know a lot of foreigners who have dual employment contracts. This is getting trickier and trickier to defend, not only in China, but I've also seen now in Europe. So try and localize it that you have one employment contract, has all the terms and conditions within it, but that is with the Chinese subsidiary. It does not mean that you can't maintain your Social Security payments in Europe if you as a foreigner decide to have that, but it's just from a labor contract standpoint that it's central. The reason I say all of this is because we have seen a lot of companies in China have different entities controlling different aspects of the business, of the payroll. One company is managing contracts. Another company is managing social insurance and housing fund. Another company is handling the income tax payments. And then finally, the local subsidiary is paying the net salary payment. It's complicated and complex. This used to be something we used to do in the past. I mean, I never did that, but I have seen now companies separating all of this. Try to simplify this process and bring it all in-house. Doesn't mean that your team in-house has to handle the breakdowns and all of that, but at least that the money transfers are coming from your accounts and there's a clear path of how things are being directed. All right. This will avoid a lot of tax questions, tax bureau audits and whatnot. Try and simplify that process. Just to finish off, alignment is of utmost importance. And by alignment, I mean that the labor contracts, Social Security and housing fund payments, and individual income tax withholdings are all aligned and are cohesive. All right. We want to avoid being audited, okay, by the labor bureaus or by the tax bureaus. Enforcement has become stricter and stricter. So be aware of that and try to sort out this. It's basically an internal corporate governance procedure that needs to be implemented with a standard operating procedure updated about labor contracts, Social Security and housing fund payments, and individual income tax withholdings. And then if you want to add in their allowances as well. So we finished today's presentation. I apologize, we've gone over time by about 5 minutes. But I would love to hear what your biggest takeaway was from today. I would also, this is a new presentation for me. So I would love to understand the formatting of it. If you were able to take the information away, or if I missed something, I will be doing a very similar presentation in 2024 again, based on any updates that happen between now and the date that I do it. So if the formatting has not been useful, please let me know, because it's hard sometimes to create these presentations and make it very clear, right? So I hope it has been. If it has not been, give me that feedback. If you need any clarity or transparency over salary calculations, like I said, I did my best with the Excel sheet. Let me know. Happy to bring on members of my team on those types of conversations if needed. And in the email that I'll be sending out today, if you do want to have any free advice on this, we are offering 30-minute, it's actually 30-minute now, discovery calls to see if we can actually help you with your pain points in China. If you want to be part of our Thrive in China WeChat group, that's my QR code. Add me. I will then add you into the Thrive in China community if you're not already a part of that. We post every day about articles and news and what's happening, and the community. Certain people are quite active in there. It's a great avenue if you have questions. You know, I don't do everything. So if you do have questions about other aspects of the business, we have lawyers in there, digital agencies, PR people, reach out. And last but not least, next week's roundtable is on the benefits of using a professional employer organization for your China launch. I also want to mention, I'm going to be touching on if you have existing entities in China and you want to hire people in other locations, how this service may be of use to you. All right. So stay tuned for that. We only have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 more roundtables for this year. I cannot believe it. So stay tuned for all of those that are coming up. Nobody has chatted yet. So if you've got nothing to mention, I will leave you there. And I hope to see you all again very soon. Take care and goodbye.